Okay, hi, my name is Hanaa Aldasouqi, and this is my senior thesis research looking at hyperbinding, and this is my senior thesis research looking at hyperbinding for face name learning in a Latinx population. So looking at United States Census projections from 2018, we see that the population is rapidly aging and also becoming more diverse than it ever has been before. And yet calls to diversify cognitive psychology research have still not been met, and a lot of research does not include older adults or Latinx older adults, which is why I aim to replicate this hyperbinding effect in the Latinx older adult sample. So looking at explicit versus implicit memory, explicit memory is typically when you're told to learn something and then later tested on it. So what you typically think of when you think of memory, while implicit memory is here on the right, and that's when information that's supposed to be presented as a distraction. So if the task is judging if these two faces are the same or different, and you're told to ignore the names, that information somehow slips in and aids you on a later memory task. So a study by Weeks et al. In 2016 found that older adults are better at implicit memory and using hyperbinding here on the right, while younger adults are better at explicit memory seen here on the left. So that was for face name learning and what I aim to replicate in my study. So can this hyperbinding phenomenon in older adults be replicated for a Latinx sample? So I predicted that hyperbinding would extend to older adults, but not younger adults. And that the same age bias that Weeks et al. Found in their white sample, in which younger adults were better with only faces of the same age, while older adults did not show a preference. I aim to see if that would also replicate to this population. So what did I do? Looking at this, starting here, participants saw a one-back task, which is where it's kind of flipping through faces, and they're told to press the space bar when you see a face that's identical to the one prior, kind of like in the demonstration I showed, and ignore these names. So then they had a distractor task, just a simple digit span, and then they had a learning task where half of the faces they saw were like this, maintained, so the same face and the same name were seen, and half were disrupted. So in our practice and back task, we saw her name was Josefina here, and here it is Beatriz. So they were told to now look at these faces and remember them for a later memory task. And then on the cued name recall task at the end, participants either saw, again, the maintained pair or the disrupted pair. So if participants did better with maintained, so the same name, same face from the one back task, then it's more likely that they have hyperbinded that information and used it to help them later on in the task than they are to memorize these disrupted ones. So looking at the design, I had 82 Latinx younger adults and 86 Latinx older adults via a Qualtrics panel online. We couldn't collect data in the lab due to COVID-19. However, online, we were able to conduct a study where half of each age group saw both older adult and younger adult faces, and they were counterbalanced across conditions to make sure there were no order effects. So we looked at participant age, we looked at face age, we looked at block effects or order effects, and then we also looked at pair type, which is maintained or disrupted. So what did we find? Interestingly enough, we did replicate what Weeks et al. Found in that older adults did have a significant difference for maintained versus disrupted pairs, so they were in fact hyperbinding, but we also found that younger adults tend to do this too, which I thought was interesting because they found that younger adults did not hyperbind as much. Also interesting, Weeks et al. Did a experiment with their age matched faces, and then they also did switched. So younger adults saw older adult faces and vice versa. So I tried to do this as well. And instead of finding that younger adults were better with younger adult faces, we found that younger adults were better with opposite age faces, while again, older adults didn't really show a preference. So in sum, we see that older and younger adults appear to show a hyperbinding effect for face name pairs, which is a little bit different than what Weeks et al. Found, but still replicates this to the older adult population. We found that the same age bias was a little different, in which younger adults did not show this effect, but older adults did. And lastly, I think this is just evidence of us needing to replicate and extend cognitive psychology research to a more diverse sample. And even though the study was conducted online, so participants we're performing a little bit at floor. I think it's just a good example of why we should be replicating research in a more diverse sample. And here are my references, and thank you for listening.